Hey everybody, George with JustOneDram.com. To some of you, I'm back. To others, I'm not. To those of you who don't know me, I used to do a web series on YouTube with some whiskey reviews, and I thought it was about time to bring it back with my friend Chris here.
Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Lindstrom. I run a food podcast in Rochester, where we're from, Food About Town. I'm also part of a startup, Frankly, where we're working on transparency in sourcing and distribution of food and drink products. And I am a spirits enthusiast. And my buddy George here, he's more of an industry person with a lot more experience. So we're going to go back and forth about all sorts of different stuff. I'm really excited.
And to quickly touch on my experience, for those of you who don't know, I'm a freelance spirits writer. I've worked in distillation before, I've worked in all sorts of different areas of industry, including retail for the past 9 years. But does that mean you should
Wait,
listen to me? Probably not.
well, I mean, I think you have a very unique perspective having done all these different jobs. While myself, I'm more of a just an enthusiast, but somebody who I only have a certain amount of experience. I've gotten more serious into it over the last few years. I started drinking late in my life. I don't know if I ever told you this. My first drink was at 30, my first full drink.
I think you did tell me that, but I believe you told me that while I was very intoxicated that one year we were in that judging that competition together.
Yeah, that's actually how we first met. We first met judging one of the spirits competitions here in Rochester. I got invited to do that, and I met George there. And I've done that the last 2 years, which is an absolute blast and has only heightened my nerdery about this kind of stuff. I've always been a serious taster. I wrote restaurant reviews in our local newspaper, so I'm serious about taste. I'm serious about detail, and it's something that spirits just has in spades.
Oh, absolutely, especially given I think food's the perfect thing to compare spirits to because it really is, in many ways culinary. It's like this art meets science in like this weird culinary way because you're using food ingredients to create a beverage.
Well, and I think that's what I'm really excited to dive in about when we talk about different spirits, different genres, whether it's different whiskeys or we get into other things like gins and other spirits along the way. Is talking about those techniques. I'm just interested to learn more about them because there's so many different versions. You know, we can deal with vodkas, we can deal with gins, but talking about whiskey, there's so many different versions, so many different bases, so many different techniques,
Oh,
and
almost
even with the
countless
same
at this
ingredient.
point with
Yeah,
new takes on it and things coming around every day. It's really cool.
absolutely. So I do way too many podcasts already, but you know, this is an interesting experience for me because I'm not running the show every day, but what I want to do is I want to sort of have you give me some information about what we're going to taste today and why we've picked these things together, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit.
Absolutely. So on that note, let's jump into the first thing here. So I decided to pick the Glenallachie 13-year single barrel that was selected for Ralfy Mitchell's Ralfy.com 10th anniversary. And I'm sure a lot of people listening or watching right now are familiar with Ralfy. He has been doing YouTube reviews for the last, well, over 10 years now. And he's actually the inspiration for me to get into doing the video reviews that I used to do.
Well, I can see that. I went back and watched a few of the ones you did before, and I can definitely see that Ralphie inspiration in what you were doing. He's such an interesting character, and character is a great way of describing him as a person. He's animated without being overstated, and just has such a unique personality. It makes you want to start imitating him. He's just this eccentric Scotsman who loves single malt Scotch.
Oh, he absolutely does. And he's just a lot of fun is a good way to put it. And his enthusiasm is very contagious too.
It is, and it's something that like my wife tolerates some of the things I watch on YouTube, but for because his enthusiasm is so genuine, she can watch Ralphie videos. And I think the part that I love about it so much is how enthusiastically he tastes his whiskey and how detailed his tastings are. And it's he just cares so much, and it's not a put on it. I really identify with that kind of passion that somebody has.
Oh yeah,
It really
absolutely. But
so
about
yeah,
this
so this
whiskey that is in his honor.
yes.
So,
So
single malt Scotch from the Glenallachie distillery. It's as we mentioned, a single cask. It was done exclusively in an Oloroso sherry puncheon. Puncheon's about 500 liters, so big motherfucker there.
yeah, so but talking about sherry, so these are some things I want to get into because depending on the level of people listening, there's a lot. Scotch is so rich in detail and it's thick. There's so many different characteristics. So first, scotches are often finished in different casks.
So,
So go
yeah,
ahead.
it is very rare that you'll find. There's a few out there, but very rare you'll find virgin oaked single malt or Scotch in general, simply because, well, first off, anything made from a so for single malts, it has to be not at least, has to be made from a 100% malted barley, and barley is a very uh, delicate, if you will, grain. So when it comes through and maybe becomes a whiskey, it can take on character from a barrel really quickly, and new oak can very quickly. Some people disagree with this term, but I think it's really a thing. Over oak it, and be very quickly quite astringent. So used casks are a lot better for the spirit, especially over such long periods of time aging like they have to do in Scotland.
So yeah, I mean, and often you'll see sometimes they'll be used. You can see them sometimes use bourbon casks, so use bourbon barrels or use this or use that. And this is an interesting one, and it's not just finished in a sherry; it's sitting in there the whole time. Sometimes you see ones that are, they'll sit in a bourbon and then they'll finish in a something in a port or a sherry. And
Yep,
this
and
one being
the
there the whole
finishing
time.
aspect actually, like the multiple different cask thing, was actually in the '80s brought about by a guy by the name of David Stewart. He's now only the malt master for Balvenie. He used to be for all of William Grant's distilleries, but he scaled back to just Balvenie. And dude's brilliant. He made the finishing commonplace. But yeah, this one, no finish, just 100% in the sherry cask.
And sherry being an oxidized wine from Spain.
Yeah, some
Um,
sherry styles are oxidative, some are not.
yeah,
But
this is Oloroso, which is a little bit of a darker than like an Amontillado sherry
correct.
necessarily, and you get some of those notes too.
So what are you getting on the nose and on the palate so far with this?
Well, I think the interesting thing is for something as intense being cask strength, what is this one was 120 proof, so 60% alcohol. It doesn't smell that strong on the nose. Like it's not it you don't get a big alcohol tint on the nose or anything like that.
No, it's absolutely beautiful. Now, with this being 13 years old, it was from a previous distiller before the current owner and distiller took over. But when it
Interesting.
comes down to what's in the bottle and being released, it is very much under the care of Billy Walker, who is a rock star master distiller in Scotland. And even though this wasn't distilled by him, because he's only owned the company since 2017, and this was laid down in barrel, I think it was 2006, but he would not let anything come out that's not representative of his level of skill.
Yeah, this is well, I think what we should at least start with is what's the process? Let's talk about the process of smelling and tasting for a minute because I think that's something that depending on who's watching, some of this is old hat. And part of what I want to bring to this is how I've come to do it, but depends everybody does things a little bit different way. So we're trying to do smell first and we both have Glencairn glasses. So we're using the same style glass, same shape.
And it's actually, everyone can have their opinions about which glass is best, which glass is best because of why. All these, some people love Glencairn, some people hate them, but at the end of the day, whatever glass works for you works for you. But I will say, in all of the different competitions I've judged, it has been the only glass used in professional judging competitions.
Absolutely. And it's also nice that we're tasting out of the same style glass, even though we're remote today. We're able to taste out of the same glass because it's kind of is a standard, and know that it's funneling the aromas to our face the same kind of way.
Absolutely true. Yeah, the shape of the glass definitely does concentrate the aromas in a way that makes it easier to detect all the different notes in there.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of the sherry notes on the nose.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's got some richness. You definitely smell that oxidation, but it's not in that purely raisiny kind of way. It's smooth. It doesn't have a lot of like piquant notes. It's not super sharp on the nose at all.
Right, more like dried fruit, dried dark fruit notes instead of raisinated fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to use terms that aren't necessarily 100% accurate with this, but it smells. You can smell the age. I think you can definitely smell the wood on it. It has that has some dry notes to the nose.
Yeah, definitely dry, little dusty, but not overly so, not astringent or anything.
No, and it doesn't smell off in any way, and it's very very harmonious nose, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's the most expressive nose on a Scotch that I've smelled.
Yeah, it's very we'll say it shows restraint despite being 13 years in sherry. It's not just a sherry bomb. There's nuance, there's restraint. It's not quite in your face.
Yeah, tasting sherry can be a very interesting experience. You can get a lot of really bright notes. You can get these, even though it might be like dried and desiccated fruits, you're still getting acid and these other kind of big noses.
And even,
well, I'm going to go ahead and taste. I'm excited.
Definitely more of that dried fruit. A lot of caramel and toffee, almost custardy on the palate there for me.
Yeah, and what? Now I'm breathing it in. So this does have some peat to it, correct?
No, actually, there's no peat at all in Glenallachie.
Really?
Yeah, man, no peat in it at all.
It does have it has that kind of characteristic to it, though. You know what I mean? It has some smoke. It has that.
So, what I usually tell people that's because a lot of people think they're detecting peat in a single malt. Part of it is confirmation bias, but the rest of it is barley, because it's malted barley, even without having the peat as a fuel for it, imparting flavor. Okay. It's still heavily influenced by just the malting process, and that's quite literally where they're kiln drying and heating it.
So that smoke presence I'm getting, and I think that's an interesting point, because Scotch is probably the thing I've spent the least amount of time on, especially diving into it in detail. So yeah, I think that's a great, because it's easy to attribute it to that, because that's something we all know, or at least we think we know. We can smell. We can say, oh, that's peat because it's smoke. But you're saying so it's coming from the actual grain, which is that's cool.
Absolutely, because barley on its own has like a really, really earthy kind of thing going on with it, and since peat is quite literally ancient decayed earth, it's it's all within tolerance, I guess we could say.
Interesting. So how would peat express itself differently than this? Because you're right, I'd say this is a basey. It's a rich, thick, dark, smoky taste, where it lingers on the palate. It's coating my mouth, I think, in a really nice way. I'm enjoying it a lot. But how would peat usually express itself in different ways?
So I think the best way to differentiate the notes you get from just the barley naturally and peat is peat is definitely often fairly medicinal, more iodine, kind of Sharpie marker, Band-Aid. Even when it's more subtle, you get that very vegetal, like campfirey, briny intensity.
You've given a lot of notes that if people don't know how they work in a scotch are going to be like you gave a lot of terrible tastes.
Oh,
But
absolutely. Like I'll use there's a very prominent, well loved single malt for a lot of people that I can't stand, and I don't care. I'll say it. It's Oban 14 year. It tastes like salty seagull shit to me. Like it's very very heavy on seaweedy, briny, just not pleasant stuff.
well, see that's actually one I would love to taste at some point with you because I like saline. I like those kind of notes, and that I'd be interested to see how it hits. We might even taste the same things, but we might appreciate it in very different ways.
That's absolutely true. Like that's the thing with with whiskey and just spirits in general is everything is incredibly subjective. The thing, there is such a thing as like technically correct and you can measure flaws and things and all that. But even with or without flaws, if someone likes it, good, great, enjoy it. Drink more for you then.
Well, I think it's an important thing that you know, despite a certain level of like we care about the details, we care about tasting, we care about all these things. All that really matters in the end is you drink what you enjoy. We might have other ideas, we might have other tastes, and that's okay. I think all we want, and people who I know who are serious about spirits, is if you're sitting down and tasting something, try to enjoy it seriously to a point. Like we're not sitting here with this, 13-year single barrel thing and slamming it down. We're enjoying it. We're savoring.
Exactly. And with this one, I'd feel bad slamming it down anyway because there was only 672 bottles.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty fantastic.
Now I think there was another release in commemoration of Ralphie's 10th anniversary done in a port barrel. I don't believe that came stateside, but in terms of what came stateside, the sherry one, yeah, only 672 barrels or bottles from the barrel exist.
Wow.
But
Well,
what
I
do you
think
say we move on to the next thing here?
well, I'm actually going to take a second to become more nerdy. This is something that we did during the spirits competition. I make my own hot sauce, so I use a hot sauce bottle, but I'm going to drop a couple drops of water in this. So
And what
while
kind
I'm
of water are you?
So I filtered it through my fridge. It's not distilled. It's not 100% clear. Nor did I add any minerals to it, which I have done in the past. So it's, I'd say, lightly filtered. But why don't you explain why I'm doing this?
So, the concept of diluting your whiskey with a little bit of water, uh, it can change a spirit, especially something at such a high proof. Literally, when you bring a spirit down to its proof that goes into a bottle when it's not cask strength, is the addition of usually reverse osmosis water, and it can open up the spirit quite a bit or can make it fall apart.
Yeah, so what we were doing in the competition, at least at the table I was sitting at, we would do 3 drops, just 3 drops of water. And it was amazing how often it would change how it smelled.
Oh, it changes.
Very different.
It can change things immediately. Yeah.
And now it has definitely has a brighter smell to it, more aromatic.
It's interesting though. Something I've talked to a few distillers about. There's widely arraying opinions about addition of water to whiskey, but
Wow.
some people like myself are of the thought that the distiller put it in a bottle at the proof they put it in at. That's the intended way to try it. But again, it doesn't matter. It's all what you like. And like with scotch, the addition of water absolutely can elevate the experience. Bourbon, in my experience and many others, is it really makes things fall apart quite quickly.
Yeah. That's why typically I only do like a few drops. And I think that makes a big difference. And I love that experience of tasting it. that way. Not like actually dropped in proof, but just those couple drops. It definitely changed the profile of this a little bit. Not in a bad way. I think it brightened it up a lot, which is shocking that only that few drops can make that big a difference. Yeah, the high notes are coming through a little bit more, the high fruit notes. It almost tastes a little hotter for some reason, but anyways, I'm probably going to do this on everything we taste.
That's all right.
Just as part of the experience. But one, cheers. This was delightful, and I'm really glad I got to try this. I love sherry, and this feels like just so much sherry. What's your overall feel on this one?
I'm sorry?
What's your overall feel on that one?
I love it, but big bias because it's the Ralfy version. To commemorate his 10th anniversary. Like, I love single malts. I love sherry. So I definitely give it, like 2 thumbs up, I guess. If you will.
2 malt marks up.
Yeah. Not quite gonna start assigning scores as Ralfy does, because you know what? That 100-point system, it's a blessing and a curse. So I'm just gonna say this is damn good whiskey. If you see one of the 672 bottles, grab it immediately. It's gonna be about $150 or so, but it's worth every penny.
No, it's got some great richness. It's bright, balanced smoke, and just really delightful.
Now, ready to jump across the Atlantic back home here for us?
Yeah, this is a complete change in direction.
Yeah, total 180. The second thing we're getting into is bourbon from Pinhook. Now, story behind Pinhook is it is a independent bottler, and they are located in Kentucky, but the bottling we're currently enjoying right now is actually distilled in Indiana at MGP, Midwestern Grain Products. And they bottled it at they warehoused and bottled at the Castle and Key Distillery.
So let's talk about that for a second. So you mentioned that it was distilled in Indiana by MGP. MGP being, I'd say, I'm not sure they're the largest or one of the very largest distilleries here in America.
They're at least the largest contract distiller, I think. I don't know if they're the largest distillery, because there's some big boys there, like things owned by some of the bigger companies are huge. Sure. But I would at least say I think they are by far the largest contract distillery.
Right. So when we're talking about that, and again, we're not saying this as a negative. Sometimes people can be very purist about these kind of things. This is just a fact of where it's brewed, where it's where it is distilled. So when you say Pinhook, they don't have their own distillery necessarily. This is distilled at MGP, and that's just a fact. And when these things come up, we're going to try to be as transparent as we can and say, hey, this is done here. I know both of us believe in transparency and labeling.
Yes, and they are very transparent about the source of all of their different bottlings. And part of that is it's legally required now to say on the back they're distilled in Indiana, but also they've always just from the beginning been very... Oh, I've got a little a guest here that decided to barge into the office and have some whiskey too.
Well, this is part of the interesting thing about recording remotely in our own little studio spaces. I have more of a permanent studio space here in my house without many intruders. But since we're recording in the time of the coronavirus, we're doing what we do. We'll probably record in person in the future, but for today, we're recording remotely.
Can we stay 6 feet apart in your studio?
We can try.
Yeah, we'll put masks on and be 6 feet apart.
Yeah. I like that we have a mascot, though. That's good.
We do. We have a mascot now.
He was barking at me when I dropped the microphone off to George's house so we could use the same microphone. Oh, look at that.
Yes.
Oh, it's
All the love. All the love.
far too sweet for us.
Where were we again? We were talking about
We were talking about MGP.
transparency.
Yeah, so we were talking about MGP. So Pinhook, I've had a couple things. I actually have a bottle of one of the ryes here, which I enjoy, and I've used for cocktails here. And I'd say it's a really solid brand from everything I've tasted so far.
Oh yeah,
But
they
this,
absolutely
yeah,
they absolutely pick really good barrels, and they're probably the coolest job title you could have. Master Taster
oh,
is
that's awesome.
Sean Josephs, who also does a lot of their sales, and he's one of the founders of the company. But for a while, because of their using Castle and Key as a base of operations, Marianne Eves, while she was there, who's incredible distiller, rock star distiller right now, she was helping a lot with selection and blending. She has since moved on from Castle and Key and is doing independent distilling consulting. But actually, I don't think I mentioned which one we're drinking of this, by the way. Before I keep rambling and start talking about other releases, this is their vertical series, first release in that series, Bourbon War, 4-year-old bottle here. And what they're doing with this vertical series is they're taking the same family of barrels, and every year for the next 9 years, they're going to send another release out at each different age. So next year they'll release the 5-year, and then after that the 6-year, 7, so on and so forth.
So same lot, and then you'll use however many barrels for that run, and then another amount of barrels, but it's the same run of distillate.
Correct. But what I was about to mention, though, speaking of their other releases and Castle and Key and Marianne Eves, I can never remember if it's Eves or Barnes now. One's their maiden name, one's their married, and I don't remember which is which. Either way,
Sure.
Fantastic distiller. But their newest release of bourbon, Bohemian Bourbon, is Castle and Key distillate that was distilled by Marianne. And I haven't picked it up yet, but it's out there, and I'm actually really excited to try that one. But this MGP one, pretty damn good.
So this is bourbon, correct?
This is bourbon. Straight, not Kentucky bourbon because it's from Indiana, but straight bourbon nonetheless.
And interesting because we just went from something that was, so uniquely Scotch, with that influence of the sherry and the malted barley and everything else, and then you go to the nose of this, and it's so different.
Oh, it's massively different.
Almost a complete mindset change when you're starting to smell it.
Oh yeah, because we went from that 100% barley to this is only 4.5% barley, predominantly corn at 75%, 20.5% rye, so it's completely different animal.
Well, and I think that's really fair on the nose as well. And I have much more experience tasting bourbon and rye, and it's definitely a balanced corn on the nose. This doesn't just smell like, dry, like field corn. This has a rounded corn. You can smell a little bit of that spice from the rye.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's got that sweet yellow corn, but like without the sweetness.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. You're right. It's definitely drier,
really,
but it's got the same profile of a sweet corn, like a sweet yellow corn, with a lot of spice from that rye and almost like a dusty bookshelfy cherry wood thing going on.
No, I think that's a great note, and I think that's in bourbons that I like to drink. You definitely get some of those rich fruit notes without being overly dried. You get some of those, a little bit of that, that dark fruit kind of profile without it being like a red wine dark fruit.
Right, yeah.
It's not super present, but it's that richness, that roundness with almost that. It's not acidity, but it's that brightness. It's that combination of brightness and roundness that comes from like a good cherry.
Yeah, and I don't know, my allergies have been bothering me today, so I'm a little congested. But are you getting like Barks root beer and marzipan on the nose too?
That's interesting because I think that that high spice note from barks, because it's that bite, those high notes, and that's the thing that is really interesting on this versus the Scotch. Is a very different note, very different high notes too. And I'm not getting like confectioner's sugar. I'm getting sweet.
Yeah, like natural sweet.
Yeah, it's not quite that cloying, confectioner's sugar where it's very present. Hmm.
And on the palate, though, it definitely is a different animal than the nose. It's a lot like
No doubt.
a lot of toffee, a lot of butterscotch and caramel, more of that baking spice, like clovey almost.
Yeah, it's wow. The first thing that hits the palate is the corn, though. And this isn't one where the corn kind of completely melds in. Some bourbons, especially as they're older, this is only 4 years, like you said. As you get older, sometimes you don't get that predominant corn note on the front end. This definitely starts with a notable corn note, but it's not punching you in the face with that bad corn.
Right, it's like corn on the cob from that you heavily roasted on the grill.
Yeah, and it's weird. The middle is so round and long. This is not a quick bourbon on the palate. It lingers for a long time. The middle is so rich in toffee. And it's weird. The end is almost like milky corn, like that fresh, like when you're biting into corn that hasn't been cooked yet. You're almost getting that round, milky finish, which is a very odd note, but a really pleasant one.
I can definitely see what you're saying there, yeah. I get a lot of the like the spice on the end there too, and a lot of vanilla.
Yeah.
Tons of vanilla on the finish.
Huge. Yeah, it's huge vanilla. So
but more like vanilla bean than vanilla extract.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing. So I noticed you were breathing. You were purposefully breathing while you're tasting it. Talk about that part of the tasting.
Oh yeah. Definitely exhale first. Exhale before you sip. Do not inhale. That's not a good idea. And this one is 98 proof, so it's 49% alcohol. So not anywhere near the level as the Scotch.
What I wasn't supposed to do. I breathed in while it was in my mouth. I do like to, once it's gone, I do like to breathe in and out and let it run through your palate a different way too. It can be very pleasant.
The amount of the vanilla bean on the end though, I can't get over how much vanilla bean is on the back of the palate and into the finish.
Yeah, and it's not to say it's without its brightness, because it's still bright. And what is this one running? Looks like 98 proof?
Yeah, 98 proof.
It doesn't taste it. Like it's not hot at all, but it stays bright. It's not dull or flat like some bourbons can be at 80 proof. It's very lively all the way through.
Oh yeah, and I think that's
even with the richness.
So 80 proof is the legal minimum any whiskey can be, or pretty much most spirits in the United States can go to, and it doesn't get put down at whiskeys that are at 80 proof aren't put there because it's where they taste best at. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because this still, it has this viscosity. It's not over, and it's not it's not coating the palate, but it's rich. And man, that middle is so toffee. Not quite dark like burned caramel, but really rich caramel.
Yeah, like the cubes, like caramel cubes.
Yeah, I want to salt it almost. I'm going to drop a couple drops of water in here just to see what happens.
I'm going to be interested in seeing how you feel the water in there. Because I know that I have a bias against the adding of water, but I firmly believe most bourbon doesn't stand up to it. This one might, though.
Now, when I say adding, I am at legitimately 3 drops is as much as I added. So it's not it shouldn't deproof it at all.
Yeah, the dilution is very minor at that point.
Yeah. Different. It doesn't coat the palate quite the same. It's a little more rounded in the middle, but I think it was slightly better before. I think that coating that it did through the whole middle, that really, really rich part, it's still there, but it dances a little more now versus really, it was punching you before, like really, really hitting you in the mid palate.
So it went from like a really big bear hug to more of like a pat on the back?
I'd say more like a bro hug, where you go and you go pat pat.
Okay, now out of curiosity though, what I want you to do is hold that glass up to the light and tell me what it looks like now that you've added the water.
Now, let me get up to the best light I have here. Let's see.
Any cloudiness, any particulate, anything, any of the oils coming out of suspense?
I don't see anything notable. I don't see it coming out of. I don't see any particulate, as far as I can tell. But it's a little bit difficult. It's not optimal lighting in here. I imagine this was filtered, would be my guess.
They don't say either way. When it comes to filtration, I actually, there's really long-winded explanation of if chill filtration actually impacts flavor or not, and it's pretty heavily debated. And there's a lot of people who think that they swear that chill filtered whiskey is inferior because it takes out flavor, but when people try chill filtered and non-chill filtered whiskeys blind, there's people really don't tell a difference there. But this one does not say either way on the bottle.
Regardless, though, this is really pleasant. I'd say this is the kind of bourbon I would like to sit with and work through. And I think generally, I don't think that it needs more. It needs more water. I think it was right where it needed to be, proof wise, sitting there. Yeah, that's really nice, and it's. I think what I'm interested to as we start to dive into different bourbons is to look at the character of them and learn more about. I know what I like, but I don't know all the characteristics of it as as you work through it. And I'll be interested because it's as you get into some of the fancier bourbons that I haven't spent a lot of time with. I've done a lot of New York State stuff, but I haven't spent a lot of time on bourbon, to be honest, and I'm really interested in learning a lot more as we go forward.
Now, bourbon's one of those things where I've spent, in my opinion, I guess I'll say, a little too much time on. Bourbon is a little getting to be kind of boring, and I wrote a article I think a year or two ago about bourbon essentially getting boring at this point and how it needs to be revitalized and changed up, and there needs to be some changes, and like craft people should be doing different things like heirloom grains and hardwood smoking and just making things interesting again. But
Where
regardless,
was that one
a bourbon that tastes like bourbon, it has to be well executed to do so. So
yeah,
this is well executed.
Absolutely. Where was that article published? So if people want to go look at it.
It was in Artisan Spirit magazine. I don't remember which issue, but if you go to justonedram.com, I've got a portfolio page that'll link to everything I've ever had published.
Yeah, really cool. And I think that's an interesting point because, bourbon has become such a hot button, especially for new enthusiasts, because people want to chase the fancy stuff. People want to chase the rare stuff, things that became exceedingly expensive. And even stuff that was relatively cheap in recent years has become prohibitively expensive for the normal person.
Oh yeah, and I think that's absolute bullshit in many ways because like there's certain bourbons out there that in my retail experience were those gems that nobody knew about that were cheap, like real cheap, and they became like a daily drinker for a lot of everyday people that can't get it anymore because it won some awards and tripled in price and is getting traded like a commodity illegally over the internet. So it's
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think both of our philosophies is you should be drinking good whiskey with other people. Like this isn't something you want to sit, not to say you won't enjoy sitting down and enjoying it by yourself, but like you want to drink this with other people. You don't want to let it sit forever on your shelf. It's not a showpiece. It's this is for enjoying.
exactly, yeah. These were made to be enjoyed. They're made as a consumable. They're a food product. It's they're not meant to be stared at and collect dust. Crack it open, drink it.
Absolutely.
But as to the point of you don't have to there's everyone wants to get into really expensive and hard to get things, but you can get great stuff for this is a $15 liter of Henry McKenna bourbon from Heaven Hill Distillery. And you can sit down and drink this and enjoy it. You don't need to spend tons of money on something to enjoy it.
Absolutely. And it's we're going to talk about we're going to talk about spirits from all different kinds of distilleries. This isn't just going to be high craft, and it's going to be all sorts of different things. We'll talk about daily drinkers and basically anything that grabs our attention. But I think we want to approach these topics from from a little bit of a thoughtful perspective. Why are we what do we enjoy about this versus something else? Why is this a good daily drinker, and what's a good value?
Right. It comes down to what's a good value, what's of good quality, but also what has a cool story. Like why should we give a shit about the person who made it? Like what's cool, what's different. Like with Pinhook, there's a cool story here. Like, yeah, it's sourced. They're honest about it being sourced, but every release is named after a racehorse that happens to also be named after whiskey. Like this one, Bourbon War. There's a horse, Bourbon War. And that's a cool story there.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's also not that it's all label, but it is a cool label too.
Oh yeah,
And
beautiful packaging, great wax. The bottle's a little tall, and
yeah,
when I don't ask why I was measuring bottles earlier, but this is like it's about 14 inches tall. That's a huge bottle, and it stands out on the shelf that way. But also for someone like myself who works in the retail end of things, it's a pain in the ass to fit on the shelf sometimes, depending on where the shelf is.
I was gonna say, thankfully my shelves at home have I've got enough clearance. But if I had an extra shelf on there, there's no way I'd fit that in there.
No,
No way at all.
absolutely not. But it's not always what about blah. It's not always about the outside of the bottle though. It's what's in it, and this is what America tastes like. That's bourbon right there. Tastes like America.
It does. But I think for especially for a 4-year bourbon, this has really good mature notes. You still know it's a 4-year. This isn't a 10. This isn't something that's had a long time. But for a 4-year bourbon, this is a really well made product with a lot of good richness that this is one you want to sit with and enjoy.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, definitely on its own, or it'd be good in a higher end Manhattan for sure. This is only like a $45 bottle, so it's nothing too
Oh,
crazy.
that's not bad. And the regular ones, just in case people want to get into the regular Pinhook, that's probably what in the 30s.
Yeah, depending on what state you're in, yeah, 30 or so.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good mid price bottle that you can get into. And this, if you want to take a step up for something that has a more of a story and you can start tracking year to year, it's a really cool opportunity.
Oh yeah, I really love the concept of the vertical series. I'd like to see more distillers do that actually.
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's something that's very popular in the wine world, where you'll taste a 2010 versus a 11, 12, 13, 14, And wine obviously is more affected by the outside, um, by the growth season. But it's not like barrels aren't affected by the different seasons and the years they go through.
Exactly, yeah. And while it's cool in the sense of wine, like the different vintages being so drastically different, what's cool with this vertical though is you also get like it's kind of like trying like if you get 10 bottles of the same vintage and then every year crack a new one open, it's a lot like that too.
Yeah, I'm actually looking to do that. I'm looking to start collecting bottles for my anniversary year. Unfortunately, I forgot to do it earlier, but um, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting way of trying to understand how things are affected too, and it's looking at I wouldn't say just one variable, but reducing the amount of variables and saying what does age do to this same thing, and that's really cool. It's a great opportunity to try to taste what that really means.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, all right. Well, we've gone through our two products. So for this episode, we tasted I'm going to try to pronounce this properly. The Glenallachie. Did I get that right?
Not quite close enough, but Glenallachie.
Glenallachie.
Glen, or if
Glenallachie
you want to,
13.
or as Ralfy would say, Glenallachie.
Glenallachie. This is the 13-year single Oloroso sherry cask, the Ralfy 10-year anniversary special, which is really I'm really
He's my
glad
hero. He's my hero.
he's so cool. So that was a really interesting product. And then we just finished the Pinhook vertical series for Bourbon War. Great balanced 4-year bourbon at a reasonable price if you want to get into that, start to get into that higher end of bourbon. Really cool. And if you want to, man, George, where can they find you if they want to talk to you more or find out what else you've done?
So I would say easiest way would be Instagram. My username I will superimpose somewhere on the video anyway, but it's Whiskey Jedi with the E because this is America, damn it.
And you can find me in just about everything: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm at Stromie. That's Stromie. And you can also find me on the Food About Town podcast. Man, I really enjoyed recording this, and I'm so excited to do more of these. This is what a great opportunity for me to ask a lot of questions and learn so much more about spirits.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to do this for a while now, and it's good to be back in the saddle, so to speak, even though it's a very different medium than I am used to.
Yeah, me too. I haven't done anything on video before, so and we'll see how it goes. And I think that's the end of our first episode. So thanks so much for listening, George. Why don't you take us out?
And here's a message from our sponsors. Never mind, we don't have any. But in all seriousness, thanks for everyone for tuning in. It's good to be back. Looking forward to sharing a lot of spirits with you, and stay in good spirits.
See ya.